Assalamu alaikum students. Today we are doing the second lecture of GI module that is gastrointestinal physiology, and this is the topic today is the enteric nervous system. The objectives for today's lecture is that by the end you must know, define, and classify enteric nervous system, then name the different neurotransmitters involved with it, describe and differentiate the plexuses of the enteric nervous system, namely the myenteric and the mucosal plexus, and then in the end describe the autonomic control of the GI tract. So this is the classification of the nervous system. We have done this a lot of time. We won't go through the somatic and all the sympathetic and parasympathetic. We have done that in detail. So today we are going to be emphasizes on, our emphasis would be on the enteric nervous system. And the enteric nervous system further consists of two plexuses. One is the Orbosch plexus and the other is the Meissner plexus, which is also called as the Myenteric plexus or the submucosal plexus. So this is an elaborate diagram showing you the outflow to the GI tract. Whatever you see here in this brown or orange, whatever color you want to call it out, this is also called as a second brain, that is the enteric nervous system, works independently on its own. It has its own neurons, it has its own neurotransmitters where they are formed and released, and it does not in any case need the help of the brain. However, from the higher center, spinal cord, brain, the sympathetic autonomic outflow from the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, it does go to the enteric nervous system where it modulates its function. ठीक है, background modulation बहुत ज़रूरी है in case there is something wrong with the enteric nervous system, so you have another standby system controlling it. And in case if you are severed from the autonomic nervous system, still you have an enteric nervous system which would be taking the functioning of all the systems. ठीक है? So in this diagram, let's see how the parasympathetic, which we called as a craniosacral, ठीक है, cranial vagus के जरिए सारा innervation जाती है, much of the orid part of the GI tract, ठीक है, and then the pelvic nerves, much of the last parts, you can say the distal parts of the GI tract, which usually innervate the gastrointestinal tract through the pelvic nerves. ठीक है, तो intense innervation होती है through all the parts, that is esophagus, stomach, intestines, and then through the sacral part में pelvic nerves, आपके जो later part of the intestine, large intestine है सारा इसको innervate करता है. And then you know the neurotransmitter involved with the parasympathetic nervous system postganglionic पे कौन सा होता है, acetylcholine होता है, which is excitatory in this case. ठीक है, और जितने भी पोस्ट गैंग्लियोनिक न्यूरॉन्स होते हैं ऑफ द पैरासिम्पैथेटिक नर्वस सिस्टम के, ये आपके जीआई ट्रैक में सबम्यूकोजल and the myenteric plexus, they are located within the submucosal and the myenteric plexus. So either they would increase the activity in most cases, ठीक है, excitatory होता है parasympathetic, you know it's the rest in the digest system, remember, so it is excitatory. And then you come to the sympathetic outflow. You all knew that these are through different chain ganglia, celiac ganglia हो सकता है, mesenteric हो सकता है, जो lateral होते हैं, chains outlying the ganglia, lateral to the spinal cord, ठीक है, और ज़्यादातर the outflow is coming from the thoracic 5 to lumbar 2, lumbar second जो आपका है segment, and then they also innervate all of the GI tract, but especially the initial portions which we call as the orid, and then the distal portions which is anus, ठीक है, उसमें ज़्यादातर innervation होती है. So in general, आप जब stimulate करेंगे sympathetic nervous system को, it would inhibit the activity of the gastrointestinal tract because इसका जो neurotransmitter भी involved है, that is norepinephrine or epinephrine, which is inhibitory in this case. And then stimulation of the parasympathetic would cause excitation. So this is a general concept. कुछ एक दो इसमें वो होते हैं, लेकिन general. अब जो आपका sympathetic और parasympathetic nervous system भी है, ये कहाँ पे होता है? These usually आपका जो जितने भी myenteric और submucosal plexus होता है, इन दो layers के दरमियान में densely इसको innervate करता है. आप यहाँ पे statistics इसके brain और second brain पढ़ सकते हैं. Brain is the brain, ठीक है, आपका brain और जो एक ही ब्रेन है. देन सेकंड ब्रेन यूजुअली द एंटेरिक नर्वस सिस्टम को हम कहते हैं. सेकंड ब्रेन इसलिए कहते हैं कि इट वर्क्स इंडिपेंडेंटली, इट हैज़ मिलियंस बिलियंस ऑफ न्यूरॉन्स, and then it produces its own neurotransmitter, and then it has a barrier, ठीक है, जिस तरह ब्लड ब्रेन बैरियर होता है ना, कि जो ब्लड फ्लो टू ब्रेन को रिस्ट्रिक्ट करता है, टू सो इसी तरह बैरियर यहाँ पे भी होता है, जिसके नर्व्स को रिस्ट्रिक्ट करता है टू द सेकंड ब्रेन. So, enteric nervous system confined within the wall of the gut, and it extends from the oral part to the anus through all of the sphincters, and then it is brings about its action through intercommunicating nerve plexuses. One is the myenteric plexus, which is also called as the Orbush plexus, and the second one is the submucous plexus, also called as the Meissner plexus. So now both of these plexuses, they are composed of intricate network of unmyelinated nerve fibers intermingled with clusters of neuronal cell bodies, which are arranged in the form of the ganglia. So coming to the myenteric plexus, also called as the Orbush plexus, you have a different type of multipolar neurons in it, and mostly motor functions. जो motor functions हैं, याद रखें myenteric for muscle, याद रखें M for multipolar neurons present, and then another M for motor function, then another M for movements. So this plexus is, since it is located between the outer and the circular layers of the smooth muscles, so it is basically important for the motor function the GI tract. And then the second one is the submucosal plexus, also called as the Meissner plexus. Now this lies between the inner circular layer and the muscularis mucosa. Now it contains usually the sensory functions होते हैं. It can contain bipolar, unipolar, and even multipolar neurons. Multipolar neurons are mostly interneurons, and it mainly controls the secretions or local blood flow. ठीक है, absorption में भी effective है. So ज़्यादातर secretion, and it is always excitatory. मतलब कि ये इस तरह नहीं होता कि क्योंकि हमेशा जब भी secretions होती हैं, जब भी आप कुछ खाते हैं secretions होती हैं, तो it is always excitatory. ये नहीं होता कि कभी ये inhibit करे. It is present. Now you can see these yellow, these are the nerves which are interspersed between the showing the plexuses of the myenteric and the Orbus Meissner plexus. Between this is the longitudinal muscle layer and then the circular outer muscle layer. So autonomic nervous system क्या करता है? It maintains the peristaltic movements and therefore the secretory functions. Basic functions इसके ये हैं कि peristalsis करता है, active movement करता है, and then secretory functions, secretions of different neurotransmitters, different substances, and it can even function without the participation of autonomic nervous system. Not necessary, ठीक है? It works on its own. Digestive processes would be occurring even if you sever the autonomic nervous system GI tract. Now it works independently, ठीक है? It is almost equivalent to the number of neurons in the spinal cord. Even more are present within the enteric nervous system, and there usually 10 to 100 million neurons. So it can work independently. Just does not need the brain to be present always over there. Since it has no endoneurium, the neurons of the enteric nervous system, so it might take a long time in healing if there is damage. Otherwise, can work independently. And all type of, for example, we did the glial cells and the astrocytes, which made the blood-brain barrier and would not allow the blood to enter into the brain. Remember all of those things. So similar blood ganglion barrier is present over here, and same types of cells which are made independently here in the enteric nervous system exist within these plexuses and these layers of the mucosa and submucosa, and they form type of a barrier which is called as the blood ganglion. Now three types of functional neurons are present like elsewhere. जब भी nervous system की बात आती है, sensory neuron ज़रूर होगा, motor neuron ज़रूर होगा, और एक interneuron होगा. Interneuron के अपने different so sensory neurons are usually bipolar or unipolar and mostly confined in the submucous plexus. Now the uh, activation for sensory neurons is stretch, ठीक है? S से याद रखें, और S से submucous याद रखें, और S से stretch याद रखें. So और S से secretion याद रखें. तो आपको ये पता चल जाएगा कि submucosal plexus contains a lot of sensory neurons which are excited by the stretch, and when they are stimulated they cause secretions. So everything is starting with S. Remember guys, myenteric plexus में M था. Myenteric plexus, muscle, movement, so everything was with M. So this is with S. This is we are talking about the sensory neurons. We are talking about the submucous plexus. We are talking about the stretch receptors, and then we are talking about its stimulation. Okay. So you can see here the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, preganglionic and sympathetic, mostly postganglionic, lying intricately intermingled within all these layers of the myenteric and the submucosal plexus. Now one thing here, ये तो पहले भी आप कर चुके हैं, लेकिन यहाँ पे ये देखें आप epithelium है, तो sensory fibers, they are usually passing from this luminal epithelium and gut wall of this enteric plexus to the prevertebral ganglia, या तो फिर even आपके spinal cord और spinal brain stem higher centers पे चले जाते हैं. ठीक है. तो जब भी हम लोग गैस्ट्रोइंटेस्टाइनल नर्वस सिस्टम करते हैं, तो नर्वस सिस्टम जब हम इवन सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टम करे थे, आप लोगों ने रिफ्लेक्सेस पढ़े थे ना, स्ट्रेच रिफ्लेक्स पढ़ा था, डिफरेंट आपने रिफ्लेक्सेस पढ़े थे कि जो कि ऑटोनॉमिकली होते हैं, आपके सबकॉन्शियसली होते हैं. तो अ लॉट ऑफ रिफ्लेक्सेस आर अकरिंग देयर इन द एंटेरिक नर्वस सिस्टम, जिसको हम गेस्ट्रोइंटेस्टाइनल रिफ्लेक्सेस कहते हैं. तो ये दीज आर थ्री टाइप्स. ठीक है. एक तो रिफ्लेक्स ये होता है कि जो विद इन हेयर यहाँ पे खुद से अपना जो रिफ्लेक्सेस विद इन द एंटेरिक नर्वस सिस्टम ओरिजिनेट होगा, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज द रिफ्लेक्सेस विच आर इंटीग्रेटेड इंटायरली विद इन द एंटेरिक नर्वस सिस्टम. उसको एक्सटर्नल किसी चीज़ की ज़रूरत नहीं है. देन द सेकेंड आर द रिफ्लेक्सेस दैट अराइज फ्रॉम द गट. ठीक है. आपके गट में से ही अराइज होते हैं, and then to the they go through the sympathetic ganglia तक जाते हैं, लेकिन दोबारा वापस आ जाते हैं. So these are the second type of reflexes, and the third are that the reflexes, they arise from the gut, they go to the brain or the spinal cord, ठीक है, and then they come back again to innervate. So these are the three types of reflexes. Anatomical arrangement इस तरह है that ये हो सकता है. This is for the support, ठीक है, of the enteric nervous system, which comes from both the sympathetic, parasympathetic and higher centers, जिसमें brain और spinal cord is also involved. So what is the role of these interneurons? These project longitudinally up and down to a series of motor neurons in different parts of the myenteric and the mucosal रेलिंग. ठीक है. या तो मोटर न्यूरॉन्स एक्साइटेटरी होते हैं या इनहिबिटरी होते हैं. एंड इफ देयर इज एक्साइटेटरी न्यूरोट्रांसमीटर रिलीज, एसिटाइलकोलिन फॉर एग्जांपल, या सब्सटेंस पी, तो एक्साइटेशन होगी. और अगर इनहिबिटरी न्यूरोट्रांसमीटर है, फॉर एग्जांपल एटीपी या वीआईपी, वेजोएक्टिव इंटेस्टाइनल पॉलीपेप्टाइड, या नाइट्रिक ऑक्साइड है, तो आपकी इनहिबिशन होगी या नॉर एपिनेफ्रिन. Now the type of whatever would occur, either there would be relaxation or contraction of the gut, depends on the type of the receptor reliefs from the type of the neuron. ठीक है. motor neuron. अब ये inhibitory motor neuron है, enteric motor neuron. देखो ये इसको हम enteric, totally a population of neuron which is just found within the enteric nervous system. For example, this is inhibitory motor neuron, and then it releases ATP. Now you know that ATP is a excitatory neurotransmitter, so it was usually inhibitory neurotransmitter, so it is causing inhibition. And then you have excitatory enteric motor neuron, which usually through the transmitter release, for example substance P, or so it is going to cause excitation, and this is being led to the contraction. So the motor neurons fibers, they project to all these areas, the smooth muscle, muscularis mucosa, glands, vessels, everywhere. ठीक है. And some fibers even are projected outside the gut. For example, for the autonomic nervous system modulation, to the mesenteric blood vessels, or to the regulation of different outflow. Now there are a lot of neurotransmitter released. ठीक है. ये नहीं है, ये सिर्फ ये नहीं है कि acetylcholine is released और norepinephrine, parasympathetic और sympathetic, ये तो आप लोगों को पता है. लेकिन उसके अलावा फॉर एग्जांपल ATP आप लोगों को बता दिया, सेरोटोनिन, डोपामीन, कोलिसिस्टोकाइनिन, सब्सटेंस पी, वेजोएक्टिव इंटेस्टाइनल पॉलीपेप्टाइड, मेटेनकेफलिन, एंड द लिस्ट गोज ऑन. ठीक है. अ लॉट ऑफ. और जब ये आप हर एक सेगमेंट करेंगे, उसके साथ आपको स्पेसिफिक न्यूरोट्रांसमीटर और उसका फंक्शन और किस एरिया पे क्या स्पेसिफिक है, so we will be doing that. Now we did the reflexes. I told you there are three types of reflexes within the GI tract. Reflexes that are integrated totally within the GI tract. Reflexes that originate from the GI tract would go through the sympathetic prevertebral sympathetic ganglia, then come back again to the GI tract. And then the third was the reflexes that originate within the GI tract, but would go to the highest centers, that is the brain and the spinal cord, and then come back. Okay, so we have three types of reflexes. Now what happens, for example, this is the bolus of the food, ठीक है, और ये आपकी intestine है, for example, and it comes here. So आप देख सकते हैं इसको, आप follow करें. Number one, bolus of food stimulates sensory. We said that sensory जो आपके neurons हैं वो stretch से, as for sensory, as for stretch, so they are excited by the stretch, and whenever they are excited by the or distended by the stretch, what happens कि आपके motor neurons को activate करता है, and the motor neurons produce relaxation in front of the bolus. So इस bolus को नीचे जाने के लिए, of course, अगर ये तंग रहेगा, contracted रहेगा, so this bolus won't be able to go down. So for it to be to go down, you need a relaxed and in front of it. This is also sometimes called as receptive relaxation. ठीक है? So the bolus would just go down. This is also called as receptive relaxation. And then what happens distal to the bolus, there would be contraction so that it could force the bolus down to the relaxed part. And this is also occurring through the interneuron and the motor neuron, which stimulate contraction behind the bolus. And since you can see, you have a lot of these sensory neurons. अब जो हम लोगों ने किया था कि epithelium से within itself, they would just go and they can go through different neural control of the gut. ठीक है, different plexuses में जा सकते हैं, higher centers में जा सकते हैं. Now the summary of today's lecture, you have a separate entity, a second brain, which is called enteric nervous system, further subdivided into myenteric and the submucosal plexus. And then myenteric plexus mostly and the submucosal plexus कौन से cells पे affect करते हैं? Smooth muscle cell पे, contraction में, secretion में, endocrine cells, and then the blood vessels absorption में भी काम करते हैं. And then you have the vagus, the craniosacral outflow, and then you have the sympathetic division. ठीक है, अब from अगर आपको याद हो तो हम T5 से L2 पे sympathetic ganglia through celiac and all these ganglia, the mesenteric ganglia जो है ना innervation होती है, and all this is to just modulate. ठीक है, modulate करता है activity of the enteric nervous system, though enteric nervous system. Now these are the differentiating factor. ये एग्जाम में बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, वाइवा पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, मायंटेरिक और सबम्यूकोजल प्लेक्सिस और इनके क्या फंक्शंस हैं. मतलब मायंटेरिक वी डिड एम फॉर मायंटेरिक, एम फॉर मसल, एम फॉर मूवमेंट, एम फॉर मसल टोन. ठीक है, मसल टोन की भी डिफरेंट कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स होती हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल उसकी इंटेंसिटी, उसका रेट, उसका वेलोसिटी, ये सब को कोऑर्डिनेट करता है. ठीक है, क्या करेगा? इंक्रीज टोन एक कॉन्ट्रैक्शन करेगा, इंक्रीज इंटेंसिटी of rhythmical contraction करेगा, increase rate of rhythmical contraction करेगा, increase velocity करेगा, rapid movement करेगा, peristalsis. So this is all myenteric plexus, and it is composed both of excitatory and inhibitory. मतलब कि ये movements can be inhibited or excited. Submucosal plexus आपको पता है, it's control within the inner wall of each segment of the intestine. लोकल सिक्रीशन, एब्जॉर्प्शन करता है, और सब म्यूकोजल मसल का लोकल कॉन्ट्रैक्शन को एड करता है, अदरवाइज ऑल गट के मसल्स को नहीं करता. एंड इट इज कंपोज्ड मेनली ऑफ एक्साइटेटरी न्यूरॉन्स. So injury to the enteric nervous system neuron or its pathway may lead to chances of slow recovery. I told you, since there is absence of endoneurium, so recovery is there, but it Now there is always a rhythm, ठीक है, between a healthy state आप देख सकते हैं यहाँ पे, और एक disease state देख सकते हैं. ये आपको जिस तरह blood brain barrier होता है, इस तरह ये intestinal epithelial barrier है. When this is intact and a person is healthy, so there is a normal hemostatic signals are, there is normal gut physiology, और आपका healthy CNS function होता है. Now your central nervous system disease state, stress, anxiety, a lot of CNS diseases, they affect your enteric nervous system a lot. ठीक है. So in this case, you can see symbiosis normally hota hai, different pathogens already are present within your gut, but they don't cause disease because they are just living. Your body cells, your immune cells are overriding them, and then there is an intact surface, they do not leak, so you are in harmony. But what happen if there is stress, for example, if there is anxiety, if there is abnormal behaviors, or there is visceral pain, or there is some disease, gut disease, so then what happens? A dysbiosis occur. मतलब जो आपका symbiosis था, it converts into dysbiosis, and then that आपका जो harmony थी, that is broken. and you have a leaky gut. आप देख सकते हैं spaces इसमें आ गए, and all these pathogens they can go in and they can cause disease, and you can see what is psychobiotics. Disease even can be caused by your stress or the diseases within your brain, which can lead to your diseases of the enteric nervous system or the GI physiology. So here again we can see कि stress जो है ये एक major function है. आपके different type of stress जो होता है वो gut brain axis को damage करता है, और gut brain axis को disrupt करता है through neuroendocrine system, neuroimmune system, autonomic and enteric. These are the things that they affect, that they attack. ठीक है, and इनको जब attack करेगा तो क्या होगा? Functional GI disorders हो जाएंगी. For example, inflammatory bowel syndromes या फिर post infectious IBS, inflammatory bowel syndromes हो जाते हैं. And then it can also, for example, different microbes, yeah, different pathogens, they can also affect your brain, and they can also then cause dysbiosis through different inflammatory cytokines. ठीक है, different neurotransmitters ऐसे release करता है, या inflammatory markers जो कि आपके gut के wall को और gut को damage करता है. Now this is one of the review article. ठीक है, इसमें देखें ये इतना important है. Second brain and Parkinson's disease, ये किसी ने research की थी, and they said that the Parkinson's disease जो कि एक neurodegenerative है, you all know, कि जिसमें substantia nigra आपका affect होता है. उन्होंने ये इसमें postulate किया कि it is evident in recent year. You can see over here marked in red. Parkinson's disease is a multicentric neurodegenerative process that affects several neuronal structures outside the brain and the substantia nigra, among which is the enteric nervous system. So, another article which it states that Hirschsprung's disease, which is a congenital aganglionic megacolon भी इसको कहते हैं, जहाँ पे cells आपके deficient होते हैं, aganglionic होते हैं. So it is also a disorder of. So the gut brain connection, it is quite evident, ठीक है, working on its own but moderated by the CNS. And if you have certain, देखिए आपने देखा होगा stress में, anxiety में, the first thing you need, you feel is like आपको fullness होती है, या आपको nausea होता है, या आपको vomiting शुरू हो जाती है, या आपको loose motions शुरू हो जाते हैं. So the first thing the stress affects usually. So thank you guys. Hope to see you soon on campus. We are just intimating कि 23rd पे जो तक तो ये online चलेगा, and after this we are hoping for physical classes. So see you soon, inshallah. Till then, Allah Hafiz.